Hello, esteemed audience, and welcome back. Today, I bring you a chilling tale, one that the media once branded as one of the 10 most horrific massacres since the founding of the People's Republic of China. The events of this case are so gruesome that the public bestowed upon the perpetrator the moniker, the gut-wrenching ghoul, for the villain left nothing but the horror he sowed. What he sought was not money or sexual gratification, but fear and an obsession that would haunt the memories of the survivors. Our story begins in Qiantan, a town nestled in Ganzhou County, Jianye City, Ganzhou Province, China. Established in 2002, Qiantan lies in the eastern suburbs of Ganzhou County. It's a bustling place, home to 15 large and small villages. On the evening of August 17, 2004, a sudden storm descended upon the town, bringing with it strong winds and torrential rain, catching the residents unprepared. Around 11 p.m., the storm finally subsided, and the sky regained its tranquility, though a persistent drizzle kept the atmosphere gloomy. It was then that an old farmer named Dong, filled with worry, set out to find his flock of sheep. Earlier, they had been caught in the rain and likely sought shelter under a rock or a bush. Now that the storm had passed, he had to quickly herd them back to the fold to prevent them from catching a cold and dying. Following the bleating of his sheep, old Dong found them agitated on a small, muddy road, soaked from the rain. The clever sheep had sought refuge under the eaves of a dilapidated, abandoned wooden house. The muddy road was slippery, and the rain was growing heavier, so old Dong cautiously followed his flock. Suddenly, he saw someone lying by the roadside, about 500 meters from the wooden house, surrounded by dark, desolate woods. At first, he thought the person might have fallen on the slippery path. In this treacherous region, accidents like falling or slipping were not uncommon. Thinking this, old Dong slowly approached, intending to help. When he was just over 10 meters away, he realized the person lying there was a young woman. Exercising caution, he stood back a bit and called out loudly, wanting to avoid any misunderstanding if he approached an unconscious person of the opposite sex in the dead of night. He called out, his voice laced with concern, "Child, are you hurt? The roads here are full of potholes, you must be careful at night." Despite calling many times, the girl remained motionless. Thinking she might have fallen too hard to get up on her own, he took a few steps closer, intending to help her stand. Old Dong was aged, his eyes dim and hands trembling, so he bent down to lift her. But suddenly, he froze when he realized his foot had stepped on something soft and wet. A bad premonition washed over him as he realized the girl hadn't moved. She must have been unconscious for a long time. He strained to see what he had stepped on and discovered it was a rope, tied directly around the girl's neck. Startled, old Dong wondered if this was a murder. Was the girl strangled with a rope? Thinking this, he instinctively lit a match to illuminate the scene. With just one glance, the seasoned man was so horrified that he fled the scene, screaming, "Help me! Is anyone there?" He ran straight to the nearest house, banging on the door in a panic, stammering out only a few disjointed words, guts. This house belonged to two young men who were professional loggers, both acquaintances of old Dong. No matter how much they pressed him, he couldn't utter another word. His face had turned ashen, his mouth twisted to one side as if he had suffered a stroke, and his limbs trembled, pointing frantically towards the dark, desolate dirt road. Seeing his distress, the two young men grabbed their flashlights and followed old Dong's frantic gestures. When they arrived, they were utterly shocked by the gruesome scene before their eyes. It was a frail girl, lying on her back, with something bloody wrapped around her neck, her legs spread wide, and her body covered in blood. It turned out that what old Dong thought was a rope was actually her intestines, pulled out of her body and tightly wound around her neck like a cursed necklace. The long, winding intestines, pulled from the victim's vagina, were piled between her legs, with one end draped over her neck. Witnessing this, the two young men immediately fell into a panic, just like old Dong. One couldn't contain himself and fainted on the spot, while the other hastily called the police. The Zhangye City Police swiftly arrived at the scene. Even experienced investigators and forensic doctors were stunned by the sight. Although many of them had decades of service, having handled hundreds of serious cases, they had never witnessed such a brutal crime. News of the victim with her intestines removed quickly spread throughout the surrounding area. Despite the pouring rain, people flocked to see, forming a dense crowd. And then, one of them recognized the victim. The unfortunate girl was Ainam, 19 years old, who lived in a nearby village. Ainam was a gentle, hard-working girl who earned money to support her younger brother, who was attending university. According to the forensic examination, the victim's death was caused by strangulation. After strangling the girl, the killer mutilated her hands and vagina, then pulled all her intestines out of her abdominal cavity and wrapped them around her neck. The killer's method was utterly ruthless and vicious, no different from a wild beast devouring its prey alive. He was indeed a gut-wrenching ghoul, not a normal human being. The forensic doctor was also surprised to discover that the killer seemed to have a rather clear understanding of human anatomy and structure. He carried out the act precisely and neatly. Therefore, this was not a random crime, the killer had meticulously planned it beforehand. What was particularly noteworthy was that Ainam showed no signs of sexual assault or robbery. Everything pointed to the fact that the perpetrator had no motive related to money or sex. Furthermore, he left no traces. Valuable clues such as footprints or fingerprints were completely washed away by the heavy rain. Everything seemed to vanish, leaving only Ainam's cold corpse. The news of the gut-wrenching ghoul quickly spread throughout the small town, leaving its residents bewildered and terrified. Was it possible that the perpetrator harbored a deep grudge against Ainam, leading him to mutilate her body after her death? To clarify this suspicion, the police immediately sought out Ainam's relatives and friends, hoping to gather more clues. The first person they contacted was Ainam's landlady. Upon hearing the news of the girl's murder, she wept with pity. According to her, the victim's family was very poor. Her parents were honest farmers who toiled in the fields, making their lives very difficult. Ainam also had a younger brother who was an excellent student. Since the family couldn't afford to send both children to school, Ainam had dropped out of high school and worked part-time to help her family. Ainam worked as a sales clerk at a supermarket in Zhangye City and rented a small wooden house quite far from the city center to save on expenses. The landlady believed Ainam was a kind-hearted and enthusiastic girl. Although not tall, her face was very pretty, and everyone who met her was fond of her. Ainam's lifestyle was proper and honest. She never made casual friends and had almost no friends, as she was always busy with work. With this information, the police ruled out the suspicion that the killer murdered the victim due to personal conflict or revenge. So, what was the real motive? The killer's methods were too sophisticated, as if he acted merely to savor the pain he inflicted on his victims. Who was he? Why did he do this? No one knew, but what was certain was that the gut-wrenching ghoul had begun his hunt, and no one in the town could feel safe anymore. Throughout the world, murders involving disembowelment have occurred, but never before had there been a pervert so sick as to pull out a victim's intestines from their genitals. The reputation of the gut-wrenching ghoul quickly spread throughout the small town of Qiantan, and then to the entire city of Zhangye, causing widespread panic in the local area. Typically, after committing such a heinous crime, the perpetrator would go into hiding for a while. However, what no one ever expected was that he quickly reappeared and committed another terrifying crime. Early on the morning of September 20th, Ganzhou County was shaken once again. Just a month after the first gut-wrenching ghoul murder, another tragedy struck. pushing public panic to its peak. At a small beef noodle restaurant on Dong Street, owner Min, who had only opened the shop 3 months prior, could not have imagined that the evening of September 19th would be the beginning of a nightmare. Her noodle shop was famous for its special ramen, but due to its somewhat secluded location, it didn't have many customers. Therefore, she could only afford to hire one waitress, a 17-year-old girl named Tu Hoa, who was gentle, hardworking, but from an extremely difficult background. Tu Hoa and Ms. Min were originally from the same village. Her family was so poor that they had to make their children drop out of school to work part-time and help their parents support younger siblings. Having worked at the shop for less than 20 days, Tu Hoa had already won the trust and affection of her boss due to her diligence and politeness. But no one expected that on that fateful night, the little girl's life would change forever. On the evening of September 19th, as the shop was about to close, Tu Hoa suddenly felt stomach pain and asked to use the nearby public restroom. The restroom was only a few dozen meters from the noodle shop, but Tu Hoa had no idea she was about to confront the horror lurking in the shadows. About 5 minutes after Tu Hoa left, a desperate scream echoed. Ms. Min, who was tidying up the shop, immediately recognized Tu Hoa's voice. A bad premonition washed over her, and she rushed straight to the restroom. She repeatedly called out Tu Hoa's name, but there was no response. Ms. Min ran around the area searching for Tu Hoa. Her screams shook the small neighborhood, waking up the surrounding residents. Some helpful residents ran out to assist her in finding Tu Hoa. Finally, Tu Hoa was found behind a residential building, near the restrooms, lying motionless, bleeding profusely. Tu Hoa's small intestine had been pulled out of her vagina. Blood and feces were scattered everywhere. Owner Min had never witnessed such a tragic situation, so she collapsed and fainted on the spot. Fortunately, the neighbors who were with her rushed to help and called the police. The young girl was immediately rushed to Zhanya People's Hospital. The hospital immediately summoned its most experienced specialists to provide emergency care. Dr. Lu Bok Fook, Director of General Surgery, personally performed the surgery. He had witnessed countless severely injured patients, but upon seeing Tu Hoa with her intestines removed, Director Lu was utterly stunned, momentarily dazed. After calming down, Director Lu examined Tu Hoa's condition. He found the victim was extremely severely injured. Her greater omentum, the fatty apron of tissue that hangs down from the stomach in front of the intestines, and her small intestines were all pulled out of her abdominal cavity through her vagina. Additionally, the small intestine was severely damaged, all torn into 5 to 6 pieces, with over 2 meters of necrosis, and less than 1 meter remaining. Besides the severe damage to Tu Hoa's intestines, the perpetrator also used strong force to insert his hand into her vagina, causing severe tearing and lacerations to her genitals. This showed that the criminal was extremely cruel and vicious. Director Lu and the medical staff had to suppress their indignation, striving to resuscitate Tu Hoa, who was in a deep coma. The surgery lasted for several hours, and finally, the doctors saved Tu Hoa from the clutches of death. However, Dr. Lu warned that the intestines are an extremely important organ in the human body, playing a crucial role in digestion and nutrient absorption. Tu Hoa had to have 2/3 of her small intestine removed, which meant that her quality of life would be severely affected in the future. She would only be able to eat very little, divided into many small meals throughout the day, and would have to rely on liquid food to sustain her life. Moreover, these injuries were irreversible, so Tu Hoa would permanently lose the ability to work and even to reproduce. She was only 17 years old, but her future had been buried under the brutality of the killer. Tu Hoa's mother, upon learning of her daughter's severe injuries, immediately rushed to the hospital. This honest rural woman had never imagined that her daughter would suffer such a tragic fate. Her family was so poor that they couldn't even afford the 40,000 yuan for the surgery. Fortunately, witnessing the victim's dire circumstances, many doctors and nurses couldn't contain their emotions and shed tears, simultaneously donating money to help. After discussion, the hospital decided to waive all treatment costs for Tu Hoa. Residents of Zhangye City, upon hearing the story, organized a fundraising campaign to support the victim. A month later, Tu Hoa's family received over 100,000 yuan from benefactors, helping her cover living expenses and future recovery. News of the attack quickly spread, plunging the people of Ganzhou County into extreme fear. Businesses began to leave the area, leading to severe economic decline. No one dared to go out at night. Even during the day, they had to be cautious because the killer, the gut-wrenching ghoul, was still at large, and no one knew what other brutal acts he would commit. Facing this tense situation, the local police were under immense pressure. The case also attracted special attention from the Ministry of Public Security of China. Immediately, a directive was issued, demanding that the killer be tracked down and punished at all costs. That very night, a special task force was formed and began its hunt for the demon lurking in the shadows. Although he remained at large, the public pressure and widespread panic throughout Zhangye City left the police force no room for delay. The special task force decided to interrogate Tu Hoa, who had just regained consciousness after her coma. Although still weak and haunted by the horrific attack, Tu Hoa tried to recount every detail she could remember. On that fateful night, as Tu Hoa left the noodle shop to go to the public restroom, a dark figure suddenly appeared behind her. That person suddenly grabbed her neck, squeezing so tightly that the victim couldn't breathe or scream for help. In the dim light of the street lamp, Tu Hoa vaguely recognized him as a tall, adult man. He didn't speak much, only uttering a strange sentence, "I am not." However, his silence and brutal actions left an indelible fear in the young girl's mind. Due to the intense strangulation, Tu Hoa began to feel suffocated, her body gradually falling into a delirious state. She was dragged for dozens of meters. In her daze, Tu Hoa suddenly felt an intense pain in her lower body, causing her to scream loudly before losing consciousness. When she woke up, Tu Hoa found herself in the hospital, her body shattered, and realized that her life had changed forever. The scant information provided by the victim was insufficient for the police to accurately identify the culprit, but the unusual attack method clearly indicated that he was a cold-blooded individual, possibly a serial killer. What was strange was that although both Nam and Tu Hoa were brutally attacked, there were no signs of sexual assault or robbery. Both victims were young women with relatively simple social circles and no personal enmities with anyone. Therefore, the police concluded that the killer's motive was not revenge or robbery. The killer, also known as the gut-wrenching ghoul, was completely unknown to the two girls. There was no hostile relationship between them, nor was money involved. The reason he attacked and disemboweled the victim so savagely might be due to extreme sexual deviance. His targets were all thin girls under 20 years old. This indicated that the gut-wrenching ghoul had peculiar preferences, often targeting young, frail, and somewhat rustic girls. Another strange point in this case was that the perpetrator not only violated the victims' bodies but also had the act of squeezing their genitals, possibly due to his sexual perversion. This further strengthened the hypothesis that the killer had some medical knowledge. Thus, the basic profile of the gut-wrenching ghoul was sketched, and the police began searching for similar cases in the past to quickly identify this individual. A case that occurred in July 2004 attracted attention. On the night of July 24th, a woman named Chow was attacked while standing outside a barbecue restaurant, waiting for her husband. When her husband didn't arrive, she pulled out her phone to call him. While talking, she inadvertently walked into a small alley. Suddenly, a strange man from behind grabbed her neck and pushed her to the ground. He asked her if she was Chu Ha. In a panic, Ms. Chow screamed for help. Fortunately, at that moment, her husband arrived and heard his wife's screams. He rushed to the alley, but the strange man quickly fled when he saw someone approaching. Ms. Chow and her husband chased after him but couldn't catch him. That night, it was dark, and they only managed to identify him as a tall man with a local accent and a strong smell of alcohol. After arriving at the scene, the police found no injured person or damaged property, so they only recorded the incident without pursuing the perpetrator. Afterward, the task force continued to investigate other attacks and discovered a case that occurred a few days after A Nam was murdered. On August 15, on Ma Then Tam Street, a woman named Peng was attacked in her own home. That night, Ms. Peng was home alone when a man knocked on her door. When she opened the door, he asked if this was Zhang Wenbin's house. After Ms. Peng replied that she didn't know this person, the man immediately burst into the house and began to search every corner. Ms. Peng was terrified and loudly threatened to scream for help if he didn't leave. At that moment, the stranger suddenly softened his voice and apologized, moving closer to her. But then he suddenly stared at her body and said he wanted to buy sex for 200 yuan, even offering money to tempt her. Overwhelmed with fear, Ms. Peng screamed for help. The man became enraged, grabbed her neck, and pushed her to the ground. She continued to scream, which further angered him, and he punched her in the face, then put his hand up her skirt and squeezed her genitals hard. Fortunately, nearby neighbors heard her cries for help and rushed to her aid, causing the attacker to flee. Afterward, Ms. Peng's family quickly called the police. Ms. Peng was injured in her lower body, and the police promptly took her to the hospital for treatment. She had several strong punches, causing some bruises on her body, but they were not serious injuries. More disturbingly, the attacker had used too much force when groping her vagina, causing the area to tear and bleed profusely down her thighs. What was particularly significant was that Ms. Peng had had close contact with the suspect and could describe his appearance in detail. She stated that the man was tall, had a local accent, and smelled strongly of alcohol. This was the crucial breakthrough the police had been waiting for. Based on Ms. Peng's description, the special task force created a composite sketch of the suspect. Upon completion, an officer surprisingly recognized the person in the drawing as Qiao Jianhua, an individual he had an unpleasant past memory of. So, what was his background? And why did he target innocent young women? The answers seemed to be gradually unfolding, but the darkness surrounding this killer was still too thick. Qiao Jianguo was not a kind person. He was born on November 5, 1970, in Ganzhou district, Zhanya City, and grew up in a poor, hardworking family. As the youngest of 5 siblings, Qiao Jianguo was excessively pampered by his parents. However, this indulgence only made his personality more hot-headed and irresponsible. From a young age, Qiao Jianguo was lazy, always prioritizing eating, performed poorly in school, and frequently caused trouble. His father, a strict man, would always beat and reprimand his children when they disobeyed, but this did not improve Qiao Jianguo's behavior. A broken relationship during his adolescence caused Qiao Jianguo's life to spiral out of control. At that time, Qiao Jianguo was in love with a girl, but her family forbade the relationship because his family was too poor and had too many children, which became the source of his downfall. From then on, Qiao Jianguo's life continued to decline. He began to wander everywhere, causing trouble, fighting, and with his height of 1.82 meters and sturdy build, no one dared to confront him. Qiao Jianguo quickly delved into the underworld, joining his older brother, Qiao Jianmin, and the two became a formidable duo in their disruptive activities. In 1989, when he was not yet 19, he was arrested for participating in theft and sentenced to 6 years in prison. After serving his sentence, with the label of reformed convict, He couldn't find a decent job, so he frequently indulged in alcohol, and even got involved with drugs, dragging his brother Qiao Jianmin into addiction as well. Upon learning of this, his family, especially his father, was extremely disappointed and decided to disown him, leaving him to fend for himself. For the next 10 years, until Qiao Jianguo's final arrest, father and son did not speak to each other. Seeing his family's indifference, Qiao Jianguo plunged deeper into drug and alcohol abuse and became more reckless. He was sent to compulsory rehabilitation twice. The last time, on May 17, 2001, he was sent to a labor camp. 3 years later, on March 14, 2004, Qiao Jianguo was released 12 months early. By this time, he was only 34 years old, but he had already been imprisoned and reformed through labor 3 times within 10 years. However, the long slide in Qiao Jianguo's life did not stop there. Qiao Jianguo also had a criminal record for assaulting women, an event that also drew police attention to him. In April 2004, just 3 months before the Ainam case, Tu Ha, an employee at the Tongquoc hair salon, called the police to report that she had been assaulted by a male customer who had also taken her mobile phone. When the police arrived at the scene, they found only a few minor injuries on Tu Ha's body. What was strange was that after taking the phone, this customer returned and gave it back to Tu Ha. After checking, the police realized that this customer was Qiao Jianguo. He confessed that on that evening, he went to the hair salon to relax. After getting a shampoo and massage, Tu Ha asked him if he wanted any other services. Qiao Jianguo thought Tu Ha was flirting with him, so he joked with her a few times. Tu Ha felt offended and screamed, leading to an argument between the two. In a fit of rage, Qiao Jianguo hit Tu Ha, causing her to fall to the ground, then left. Before leaving the salon, he conveniently took Tu Ha's phone with the intention of teaching her a lesson. However, upon stepping outside, Qiao Jianguo remembered that he had just been released from the labor camp, and doing so would only make his situation worse. He returned to the salon, gave the phone back to Tu Ha, and told her not to call the police. Despite this, Tu Ha still reported the incident. No one was seriously injured, and no property was lost. It was just a minor incident. The police ordered Qiao Jianguo to pay Tu Ha's medical expenses and reminded him about his behavior. With all his actions, Qiao Jianguo was certainly not a gentleman. He was willing to assault women over minor conflicts and frequently drank heavily, increasing the risk of harming those around him. Furthermore, this person had more criminal records than money, and his psychology seemed quite twisted. Therefore, the Special Task Force identified Qiao Jianguo as the prime suspect in the murders. First, the police went to Ms. Peng's house, the victim in the case where an unknown assailant broke in and brutally assaulted her. The police showed her a photo of Qiao Jianguo for identification. After a glance, Ms. Peng confirmed that this was the person who had broken into her house. Next, the police asked Ms. Chao and her husband to confirm the identity of the people in the photos of Qiao Jianguo. Neither could be certain, but they affirmed that the assailant bore a strong resemblance to the person in the photo. The police continued to bring 20 photos of 20 different men for Tu Hoa to identify. Although still weak, the young girl recognized 2 of them as very familiar. She pointed to 2 photos, and one of them was Qiao Jianguo. Thus, at this moment, Qiao Jianguo was identified as the culprit. However, to convict him, the Special Task Force still needed more compelling evidence. Therefore, they traced Qiao Jianguo's movements at the times the crimes occurred. The results were incredibly surprising. On August 17, when Ainam was murdered, Qiao Jianguo was in Zhanya City. After the incident, he unexpectedly left for Beijing. It felt as though Qiao Jianguo was trying to leave to avoid attention. On September 2, Qiao Jianguo returned to Zhangye. After 3 days at home, he again rushed to Beijing. It seemed he truly wanted to evade police surveillance. More than 10 days later, Qiao Jianguo returned to Zhangye. The next day, the Tuohe murder case occurred. Qiao Jianguo's movements became even more suspicious. The special task force decided to arrest Qiao Jianguo immediately. Over 20 plainclothes police officers set up 5 surveillance posts, waiting for the opportunity to apprehend Qiao Jianguo when he left his house. However, he was not easily caught. Knowing he was being watched, Qiao Jianguo and his brother Qiao Jianmin barricaded themselves inside their home, locking the anti-theft security door, which couldn't be opened without a password. After deliberation, the special task force decided to use a trick to lure Qiao Jianguo out. Since both Qiao Jianguo and Qiao Jianmin were drug addicts, the police asked him to come downstairs for a urine test. But Qiao Jianguo firmly refused to open the door, even threatening to kill someone or commit suicide rather than fall into the hands of the police. If pushed to the brink, he would jump from the building, throwing himself to his death. The standoff lasted for 9 days without any progress. At this point, Qiao Jianguo's girlfriend and mother unexpectedly sought out the head of the special task force and presented their personal views. His girlfriend believed that Qiao Jianguo certainly wasn't a killer, because since his release from the labor camp, his family had shown him care and encouragement, and provided him with sufficient living expenses. By this time, he no longer used drugs, only drank alcohol. In March 2004, his girlfriend met Qiao Jianguo by chance in a bar. The two fell in love at first sight, quickly established a relationship, and moved in together, planning to marry soon. During this time, they decided to go to Beijing to start a ramen noodle business. They had made preliminary plans and looked for a suitable location to rent. His girlfriend stated that the police's suspicion that Qiao Jianguo left Zhangye City to avoid investigation was a wild guess. On August 10, his girlfriend went to Beijing alone to explore the market. Qiao Jianguo also took a train to Beijing to meet her on August 25. After spending a few days together, his girlfriend asked him to return to Zhangye alone first, on August 31. After his girlfriend found a suitable shop, Qiao Jianguo moved to Beijing again on September 5 to negotiate the rent together. When both parties finalized the contract, his girlfriend asked Qiao Jianguo to return to Zhangye to get cash, on September 17. Therefore, his trips were entirely for business purposes and not to evade police investigation. His girlfriend also added that during their time living together, she did not notice any unusual behavior from Qiao Jianguo, except for frequently getting drunk and occasionally causing minor troubles. Qiao Jianguo loved his girlfriend very much, so it was impossible for him to be a killer. Qiao Jianguo's mother, who accompanied his girlfriend, also affirmed that her son would not do such a thing. At the time of the tragedy, she was living at her 4th daughter's house, and only Qiao Jianguo was at home alone. Early on the morning of September 20, the night after the Tuohe case occurred, she returned home to visit her son and saw Qiao Jianguo drunk and lying on the bed. She even covered him with a blanket and saw no unusual signs. After hearing the statements from Qiao Jianguo's girlfriend and mother, the special task force also began to have doubts. Could someone with such love and affection truly commit such brutal murders? This was clearly unusual, because, according to analysis, those who commit murders out of hatred for women are often extremely resentful of society and women, live marginalized lives, and have disharmonious family relationships, especially with their mothers or girlfriends. Only then can they resort to murder to exact revenge on life. At just 24 years old, Qiao Jianguo had been imprisoned twice and sent to a reformatory. Even at 34, after serving his sentence, he still had no stable job and a history of drug use. It seemed all hope in life had been extinguished. However, when he met his girlfriend, everything began to change. Xiao Jianguo was determined to give up drugs and regain his life, relationships, and career. He had the potential for success and received help from his family, especially his mother and older sister. The entire family joined hands to help him marry and open a noodle shop. Generally speaking, the women around Xiao Jianguo treated him well, so it couldn't be said that he hated women. As his girlfriend said, from every angle, Xiao Jianguo had no motive for the crime and did not fit the psychological profile of a murderer. Furthermore, considering the timeline of the incidents provided by his girlfriend, could Xiao Jianguo have committed such a brutal murder just one day after leaving his girlfriend, then returned to her side and continued to harm others? This was indeed very unusual. Because serial killers often fall into despair regarding their work, life, or suffer from some unresolved issue. Compared to previous cases, no one in Xiao Jianguo's good living circumstances and relationships had ever resorted to murder. However, despite everything, the special task force still had to arrest Xiao Jianguo for further investigation. The head of the special task force told Xiao Jianguo that his mother and girlfriend would pick him up for a urine test. After 9 days and 9 nights of confrontation, Xiao Jianguo finally agreed. Thanks to this, the police successfully arrested Xiao Jianguo. During interrogation, the police obtained his confession. He only admitted to assaulting Tu Ha and Ms. Peng. These incidents were merely drunken provocations, not murders. As for the other cases, he claimed to know nothing. Regarding the attack on Tu Ha, the matter was clear. As for the incident with Ms. Peng, he was drunk that day and went to the victim's neighborhood to collect a debt. But because his mind was affected by alcohol, he knocked on the wrong door. It was late at night, and upon seeing Ms. Peng in her nightgown, he mistook her for a prostitute and demanded sexual intercourse, even setting a price. When Ms. Peng cursed at him vulgarly, he became enraged, pushed her down, hit her a few times, and then choked her. Indeed, if all the cases were attributed to Xiao Jianguo, it would be highly illogical. Because in the 3 cases of harassing women, the victims were all adults over 30, and 2 of them were married. However, Anam and Tu Hoa were both girls under 20, which was very different. Moreover, although Xiao Jianguo was initially assessed as timid, his resistance to the police for 9 days and 9 nights showed that he was a very stubborn individual, fearless. Nevertheless, after a day and a night of confrontation with the investigators, along with special investigative measures, Xiao Jianguo's psychological defenses completely crumbled. Finally, he confessed. Under police pressure, Xiao Jianguo's testimony began to change. He admitted to killing Anam. Xiao Jianguo recounted that he accidentally met Anam, a young girl, while she was waiting for a friend. He struck up a conversation, telling her about his life filled with failures. But when Anam tried to avoid him, he became extremely angry. The next night, when drunk, Xiao Jianguo searched everywhere for Anam. For some reason, he managed to find her rental house. Around 10 p.m., he dragged the victim outside, despite the heavy rain and muddy road, forcing Anam to go to the forest next to the dirt road, then strangled her to death. Afterward, he performed the brutal act of disemboweling the victim. After he was done, he quietly left, abandoning Anam in the pouring rain. As for Tu Hoa, late on the night of September 19th, Xiao Jianguo and his friends returned after drinking at a bar in Ganzhou. When passing by the beef noodle shop on Dong Street, Xiao Jianguo saw Tu Hoa entering the restroom. He mistook Tu Hoa for Tu Ha, with whom he had a conflict at the massage parlor, so he brutally attacked her for revenge. When Tu Hoa screamed in the local dialect, Xiao Jianguo realized he had mistaken her identity, as he knew Tu Hoa was not from around there. Xiao Jianguo feared Tu Hoa would call the police. In a panic, he choked the victim, causing her to lose consciousness. Afterward, he dragged Tu Hoa from the restroom to the nearest corridor and performed the brutal act. Upon hearing the owner's cries, he fled the scene in fear and went home to sleep. However, at the trial on January 6, 2005, Xiao Jianguo unexpectedly recanted his confession. He held his head high, denying all murder charges, only admitting to harassing women. He declared that his previous confession was forced by the police, and there was no evidence to prove he was the culprit. Xiao Jianguo's arrogance and stubbornness caused the trial to be prolonged with many doubts. After 3 trials, due to insufficient evidence to convict him, Xiao Jianguo was finally given a suspended death sentence. The story of this criminal ended, leaving horror throughout the city. The darkness Xiao Jianguo left behind would haunt them forever. Although Xiao Jianguo's case had officially concluded, many questions still lingered, like a thick fog enveloping the truth. Was Xiao Jianguo truly a cold-blooded killer? His lawyer, along with those close to him, continuously raised unresolved questions, making this case more complex than ever. First, Xiao's lawyer brought up an important point: there was insufficient physical evidence at the scenes of the 2 murders. Although the first case might have had all traces washed away by the rain, in the second case, everything was almost intact. Theoretically, given the time and the brutal nature of the perpetrator, there should have been fingerprints, footprints, or DNA evidence. However, no physical evidence was found. This made Xiao's confession, along with a few witnesses, the main basis for accusing him. This led many to question the reliability of the investigation process. Ms. Min, the owner of the beef noodle shop, a key witness in the case, also provided a detail that made people ponder. Immediately after Tu Hoa was attacked, she saw 3 young men approaching the scene, acting very suspiciously. It seemed one of them coughed loudly, as if to warn his accomplices when she appeared, and then they quickly disappeared. If these young men were not involved in the case, why would they act so strangely? Ms. Min didn't suspect anything at the time, but now, she wondered if they were involved in the case. Another doubt came from Dr. Liu, a medical professional who directly provided emergency care to the victim Tu Hoa. He believed that quickly and accurately removing the victim's small intestine was almost impossible for someone without medical knowledge. Xiao Jianguo, with a history of many years in prison, clearly could not have anatomical skills or medical experience. Moreover, even highly skilled doctors could not complete the task of finding the small intestine from the lower body in just a few minutes. To perform this act, the killer not only had to find the weak point from the lower body to the abdominal cavity but also had to be able to inflict injury in a very short time. A normal person would not even know that the intestines could be pulled out from the vagina, so how could Xiao Jianguo have done it so skillfully? Xiao Jianguo's girlfriend, who was always by his side, also didn't believe he was the culprit. She stated that since they met, Xiao had voluntarily quit drugs and was preparing to open a noodle shop to restart his life. His sudden transformation into a brutal killer seemed inconsistent with what she knew about him. She also questioned Xiao's motive in Tu Hoa's murder. They didn't have such a big conflict that it would lead to murder. If the motive was merely a misunderstanding about a missed appointment and mistaken identity, leading to murder, then it was truly hard to believe. In the case of the massage parlor employee, Xiao Jianguo and Tu Hoa also had no deep-seated animosity. The two only argued about a few trivial matters, which could never be the cause of an intent to kill. Furthermore, after hearing Tu Hoa scream, Xiao Jianguo clearly realized he had mistaken her identity. Wouldn't it have been better if he had stopped in time? Why did Xiao Jianguo continue to disembowel her like that? Xiao Jianguo's family also believed something was amiss. They felt that if Xiao was truly the culprit, he wouldn't have surrendered so easily. His actions of walking downstairs and voluntarily meeting the police, in their opinion, were not the actions of a panicked killer. What remains the most perplexing is the death of the perpetrator's brother, Xiao Jianmin. At 11:40 a.m. on December 8, immediately after Qiao Jianguo was sentenced to death at the first instance trial, Qiao Jianmin jumped from the 7th floor. However, no one understood why Qiao Jianmin chose to end his life so tragically. Did he know something related to the case? Or was his death just an unfortunate coincidence, making everything even more ambiguous? This incident further deepened the mystery of the case, as a potential witness died under suspicious circumstances. After the death sentence was announced, a segment of public opinion expressed dissatisfaction. The deceased's family affirmed that they would uncover the truth behind the case at all costs. In recent years, because Qiao Jianguo had a good record of rehabilitation in prison, his sentence was considered for reduction. By 2009, Qiao Jianguo's death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment, and then reduced to 18 years in prison. Throughout the entire investigation and trial process, the view that Qiao Jianguo was a killer who committed crimes to exact revenge on society remained unchanged. However, some people believed that this case was not carried out by him, and the real perpetrator was someone else. Of course, the most pitiful were still the victims' families and the deceased. At Ainam's funeral, her younger brother burst into tears and cried out that if he could do it again, he wouldn't choose to go to college but would do everything to protect his sister's safety. Was Qiao Jianguo truly the culprit? Or was someone else behind these horrific crimes? The doubts surrounding the case continue to linger, and those interested in the matter are still awaiting a clear and convincing answer. The concluding words for today's video will be dedicated to the deceased brother of the supposed culprit, Qiao Jianguo. He did not have the same luck as his brother, Qiao Jianguo. He didn't have a girlfriend who loved him unconditionally, nor a noodle shop about to open. So if the two brothers stood side by side in the dark, could a stranger tell who was who? And what was the reason behind his sudden death? I would love to hear your thoughts on this case. Please share your comments and discuss with us in the comments section. Thank you for watching the video. Goodbye and see you again.